How's it going, guys? Winter Kills here. Welcome back to a brand new deck profile, and this time around we're taking a look at Marincess here in the month of May. Almost June now as I'm making this video here on the 30th, but bringing you guys my updated list as post-Eternity Code as I could make it. There are some cards in Eternity Code that I feel that could fit pretty well within the strategy, and some other cards as well that aren't from Eternity Code, but we'll talk about those card choices and why I'm running some and why I'm not running others, etc, etc. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get to the profile here, but first I want to mention a quick shout out to our sponsor over at Imperium Duelist. If you guys are interested in picking up some amazing high quality sleeves to protect some of your most valuable cards, whatever it may be, they're tournament ready armor sleeves available on their site. They're doing a buy two get one sale. They have been for quite some time, and of course you can get it for 10% off using that discount code WinterKills 10 off. These two-tone color sleeves here. Same thing with this playmat and many more two-player cloth playmats like it on their site as well. They also have some amazing matte bags with some amazing artwork featuring Construct, Gungnir, Exciton, and of course, who could forget their latest release of their brand new dice themed after some classic spells and traps, you know, featuring cards like Raigeki, Pot of Greed, Scapegoat, Ring of Destruction, Solemn Judgment, and Mirror Force. The list goes on. Some of my absolute favorite dice of all time to use. So of course, if you guys are interested in picking any of that stuff up, check out Imperium Duelist down in the description below and use that discount code WinterKills10 off at checkout to save 10% off your entire order. And also, of course, do not forget to use that affiliate link to TCG Player down in the description below. Anytime you guys use and check out with that link, I'll receive a small portion of the revenue of your purchase at no extra cost to you, so you guys can shop on TCG Player as you normally would and help support the channel. And of course, if you guys want to get in on some exclusive perks and rewards, consider hitting that join button down below to get in early deck profiles, behind the scenes posts, bloopers and outtakes, things like that. So feel free to check all that stuff out. And now we'll go ahead and get into the profile here. To start, we have 3 copies of the Marincess Seahorse. Yes, the Starlight Rare versions. Massive shout out to the Prestige in my Discord for hooking me up with these things, looking absolutely gorgeous. So huge shout outs to you, my friend. Thank you very much for the extremely generous hookup. But moving forward into the profile, we have 3 copies of Marincess Blue Tang. Then we have 3 copies of Marincess Pascalis, 3 copies of Marincess Mandarin, and then we have 3 copies of the Tenyi Spirit Shadana. Since that test hand video I made, I've actually decided to sort of commit to bumping this card up to 3 in the main deck. Then moving on to our non-water monsters, we have 3 copies of Fantastical Dragon Phantasme, 2 copies of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, 2 copies of Effect Valor, and last but not least, 2 copies of DD Crow. That rounds out the monster lineup. Now we'll go ahead and do the spells, where we have 3 copies of Signet Mining, of course our main searchers, 2 copies of the Marincess Battle Ocean, 1 copy of 1 for 1, and 1 Upstart Goblin. That rounds out the minimal spell lineup. And we have here 3 copies of Solemn Judgment to start off the trap lineup, 3 copies of Marincess Wave, and 3 copies of Paleozoic Dynamiscus. And that rounds out our 40 card main deck. Now we'll jump into the extra deck. To start with the extra deck, we have 1 copy of Marincess Sea Angel, 2 copies of Marincess Blue Slug, then we have 1 copy of IP Masquerena, 1 Marincess Crystal Heart, 2 copies of Marincess Coral Anemone, 2 copies of Marincess Marbled Rock, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, 1 Marincess Wonderheart, 1 Marincess Great Bubble Reef, new from Eternity Code, 1 Mech Knight Crusadia Avermax, 1 Borlo Dragon, and 1 Abyss Dweller, and that rounds out the extra deck. Now we'll go ahead and take a look at the deck breakdown. Alright, so now I have the deck separated into a few different categories based around card rolls, our starter cards, our superior extenders, our additional extenders, and varying forms of defensive cards, as well as things like placeholder cards. So we're going to run through the entire deck profile again, but a little bit slower and way more in depth, just so everybody can sort of understand you know, what every card's specific role is within the deck. So first things first, 3 copies of Marincess Blue Tang. And also want to preface this by saying some of these cards may cross over between roles, which is perfectly fine. Just means these cards are very versatile in their own right. But are looking at our first starter card here, again, a card that helps to get our engine going and has a very easy activation requirement. Of course, Marincess Blue Tang. Upon normal or special summon, we can send one Marincess monster from our deck to the graveyard except itself, and then if it's sent to the graveyard as link material for the summon of a water monster, we can excavate the top 3 cards of our deck, and if we do, we can add one excavated Marincess card to our hand. We can only use each of those effects once per turn. So really an all-around perfect example of what a starter card is in Marincess. This deck evolves around a lot of link climbing, getting into your big link monsters, and getting all of your resources back in the process. So Blue Tang is a shining example of that, because you can use it on normal summon to Foolish Burial extenders like Mandarin or Seahorse, which will set up future plays, and then you can link it off obviously to get into your Blue Slug to add back whatever extender you sent off of this card. For say a perfect example would be Seahorse, and then you can also get a chance to reveal some of your key cards that really aren't searchable. Mainly one of them, which is Marincess Wave. So it allows you to dig into your deck for Wave, which is one of the best trap cards in this deck, in my opinion. And this card really excels at just being a starter card. Obviously, very, very easy activation requirement, just on normal or special summon. Now, moving on here, our next starter card, Marincess Seahorse. Now, for the longest while, before the Blue Tang even released, because this card came out the set prior to Blue Tang's release, this was your main go-to normal summon. We didn't have Blue Tang to do what Blue Tang does best. But this card in its own right is still pretty much gets you all the way into your big Link 3, which is a pretty good stopping point as far as link climbing is concerned turn 1. Because you can obviously just normal summon the Seahorse, go for Blue Slug. Blue Slug will add this back, special summon this card to the field via its own effect, make Anemone. Anemone reborns this card. Then you make Sea Angel, get your field spell, link into Marbled Rock, and just party from there. But this card it's just really fantastic. It's very easy activation requirements as well. Just on normal summon, it meets the requirement obviously to get into our Blue Slug. But it basically says you can special summon this card from your hand to your zone of Marincess link monster points to. So that's the main kicker behind this card. As a lot of times you're going to be linking into the Blue Slug to add this card back from your graveyard to your hand to be able to take advantage of that first effect it has. So that's why the Blue Tang is very, very good at starting up your plays, because you're going to send this card to the graveyard and also link into your Blue Slug to get this card that you just sent back off of it to continue to extend further. So Seahorse, in of its own right, it can also act as a superior extender because you can use it from hand to summon its own any Marincess link monster points to. But it also has another effect. It says during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon one water monster from your hand to your zone of Marincess link monster points to. So it does have a bit of graveyard, effects that can activate, which are pretty nice. They don't come up turn 1, obviously. It's more of a turn 3 effect, if anything. But this is why this card can sort of also function as a superior extender, and you'll see it in the superior extender lineup. But Marincess Seahorse, all-around fantastic card. Maybe not as good as Blue Tang, but on its own can still do what this deck needs to do, and it can still help accomplish the goals of the deck. Okay, so moving on here, we have the 3 Tenyi Spirit Shatana. I'm labeling this card specifically as a starter card because the overall theme of Marincess, at least the play style that I've adopted, is just the more water monsters you're able to get on field mid-combo, the better you're ultimately able to make said field. And Tenyi Spirit, opening this card alongside of any other weaker Marincess card like Mandarin or Pasklets, where cards on their own, they really don't do so much. But when combined with the Tenyi Spirit Shatana, you're able to do a lot more, specifically because you have that extra water body on the field. It's also a level 4 to help get access to key cards in our extra deck, like the Abyss Dweller. So really, really do like this card. Very, very easily accessible. Start your turn while you control no effect monsters, just special summon it to the field. So it's one reason I really, really like this card. Then moving forward for our other starter cards, we have 3 copies of Cyanide Mining. Obviously discard any card to add basically Blue Tang from your deck to your hand, or add Paskless from your deck to your hand to combo off with something like Blue Tang, just to make those plays a little bit more impactful. So yeah, obviously Cyanide Mining, a very good generic search card for pretty much every monster in our deck. Then the last starter card is here, 1 for 1. One for one is absolutely incredible. I know some people were giving me a little grief over playing multiple copies of Mandarin, but the card is such a very easily accessible extender. And just simply getting it off of one for one literally nets you the entire combo. It's just a great card all around to have and to add to any sort of play. Like if, for example, if you open something like Blue Tang and Seahorse already, you know, you don't want to use Blue Tang just to foolish any other random Marincess to the graveyard. At that point, you're free to go send something like Mandarin to the grave to continue to extend even further and make your plays even better. So one for one, just all around incredible, you know, starter card, hands down. It just nets you pretty much like I said, your full combo off of just one for one, thanks to Mandarin being as good as it is. So now into our superior extenders, Marincess Pascalis, first things first. Now, the reason why I'm labeling this a superior extender, not a starter, you know, you might be wondering if I label a card like Shatana a starter, why is Pascalis not a starter? Because Pascalis, its activation requirement is a little bit higher than that of the Shatana. Mainly because if this card is normal or special summon, you can special summon a Marincess monster from your hand in defense position except itself. So this requires having another Marincess monster in hand. And this card is also extremely susceptible to hand traps, which is very, very unfortunate. And again, this is another reason why instead of playing Call by the Grave, I'm opting to play cards like the Tenyi Spirit Thon and cards like one for one with multiple Mandarin. Is because it just makes, you know, when that bad situation arrives, when your Pascalis gets hit with a hand trap, you know, you have other cards in your field already to work with. And it just makes life a lot easier. But Pascalis, again, without another Marincess in hand, it really doesn't do a whole lot, and it only extends on other, you know, normal starting plays, I guess. It doesn't really do much to start the engine other than just by providing a Marincess name. It helps to amplify the starting process of this whole deck's engine by getting a card like Blue Tang on the field or getting a card like Seahorse on the field with having that extra water body to work with. Again, it's the same philosophy behind playing the Tenyi Spirit Chatanas. Then we have 3 copies of Marincess Mandarin. Again, it's a water, it's in archetype, you know, it's searchable via the Blue Tang. It's a one for one target. It's all around incredible. So how is this card full combo off of one for one? Well, perfect example would be you just discard per se, discard Pascalis off of one for one, summon this, then link for the Blue Slug. Blue Slug adds this back, normal it, make the you know, Sea Angel, and then use this effect to bring this card back via its own effect. Since you have 2 Marincess monsters in the field and an open link zone, you know, make Anemone, revive another card in your grave, and then just go off from there. So like it's literally full combo off of one for one, which is why I like it so much, and it just adds so greatly to any other plays. Granted, this card kind of could seep into additional extender, so keep that in mind because, again, it does require you to have 2 or more Marincess monsters on the field while it's in your hand or graveyard, and then you need to target a water link monster you control, especially on this card to your zone that monster points to. So this card sort of bleeds in between the lines of superior and additional extender. One other card I wanted to mention as a superior extender is the Marincess Seahorse itself, because, again, this card in some cases can be starting your engine, but in some cases can just extend upon it because of its special summon from hand ability, or even its graveyard effect to banish it to special summon a water monster from your hand. So superior extenders, and then sort of bleeding, like I said, into the additional extender with the Mandarin. Its effect a little harder to meet requirements for, like, other than like Seahorse and other than Pascalis and Blue Tang. So that's why I would fit Mandarin as a bit of an additional extender. And same thing can be said as another additional extender as the Marincess Battle Ocean. Obviously needing plenty of links in grave, so you've probably link climbed already a great, you know, great bit. Have already gone through some resources to ultimately equip and have, you know, the field spell up to make whatever monster you summon using Marincess Crystal Heart unaffected by the opponent's card effects. So really, really strong card. Again, it just does take a little bit of setup. Doesn't do much on its own at all. If this card was played in Search and Marincess card, it'd be fantastic, but unfortunately does not do that. It only does additional things when you're linking, you know, sort of circle has already been established. So that's why I would label this card an additional extender alongside that of like cards like the Mandarin. Now, that is it pretty much for our superior extenders, our additional extenders, our starter cards. Before we go any further, I want to mention I'm not opting to run cards like Scripton at the moment because I feel like the Tenyi Spirit pretty much does the same thing. Arguably, they have their pros and cons. The Tenny Spirit is just free to get onto the board. It's also a level 4, which is one reason I really like it. Is because it can help enable rank 4 plays. And the Scripton is basically just a level 5 Aqua Spirit. I also haven't gotten my hands on any physical cards from Etco yet, so that's another reason why it's not in here. But it is a pretty viable extender. It's not searchable off of Signet Mining, unfortunately. But again, I just like the Tenny Spirit over it, I guess, because it can be played quite literally at the start of your turn without having to invest any cards into the play and needing anything in your graveyard to be able to banish to summon it. And it's also a level 4. Again, so it helps us make Dweller, which I heard is a pretty good card this format. I'm also not running the Swap Frog engine because I just feel like it's not needed. I'd rather play more traps, real traps in the main deck than having to play a full swap engine with cards like Ronin Tonin and Dupe Frog in the main, as those adds inconsistencies in their own. I get, that opening swap in some situations with an enemy can lead to a Toad, but that's all it ever really leads to. And that sometimes that can come with the cost of having to discard multiple cards out of your hand to, resolve swap as many times as you would need to. So again, that is just my take on that. Then moving forward into our defensive cards, we have our Chainable Defense, which means these cards can be activated at any given point during the game. And they do not need to be activated necessarily in response to a certain card's activation. Or certain events taking place. So DD Crow, perfect example, great utility against cards like Eldritch and Adamancipator, so fantastic card all around. Same thing with Effect Valor. This card I've replaced with Ghost Ogre, or replaced Ghost Ogre for this card. I still really like Ghost Ogre a lot this format. I still think it's a very, very good card, but Effect Valor nonetheless is still an outright great card as well. It can stop those negations that are being put up, like, again, if your opponent tries to, then next up we have to Effect Valor. Again, I feel like this card is still a really good hand trap, hands down this format. I was playing Ghost Ogre in that test hand video that I posted a while back, but I've since decided to drop the Ogre for Effect Valor because I think Valor is just maybe a little bit better, but again, Ghost Ogre definitely does have its pros. But again, just more interaction with the opponent on their turn. This does have to be activated during the opponent's main phase only, but again, it does not have to be activated in response to a certain card's activation. So we don't need to activate in response when our opponent is activating an effect. We can just, use this at any given point that we want to use it in. So I like Effect Valor and DD Crow for those reasons. Then more chainable defense, the Paleozoic Dynamiscus. This card is great because it also can serve as back row removal too. It does not discriminate what card it needs to banish, and you don't need to activate this at a certain time. And it can also bring itself out of the graveyard to use as link material to help get into some of our other Marincess monsters if it does come up, or just our generic other link monsters as well. Cards like Nightmare Unicorn and IP Masquerena, things like that. So Dynamiscus, again, it can be an out to Mystic Mine, it can be an out to just back row in general, or it can just out powerful monsters that we might not have the means to deal with otherwise. Then we have basically one of the best cards in the entire deck is the Marincess Wave, as our last 3 copies of our chainable defense cards can be activated at any given point, but basically says if you control Marincess Link monster, target one face-up monster your opponent controls, negate that face-up monster's effects until the end of this turn. Then if you control Link 2 or higher Marincess monster, all face-up monsters you currently control are unaffected by your opponent's card effects, which is insane, but it gets even better. And it says, if you control a Link 3 or higher Marincess monster, you can activate this card from your hand. So it becomes a steroided up impermanence, because on resolution, if we control that Link 2 or higher Marincess, all monsters we control, all of them, not just Marincess monsters, so our Dweller, our Avermax, our Nightmare Unicorn, our IP Masquerena, whatever it may be, become unaffected by our opponent's card effects, which is insane. So Marincess Wave, fantastic card all around. The only problem is it's not really searchable unless we get it off something like our Excavation from the Blue Tank. So yeah, that is it for our chainable defense. Now we move into the responsive defense. These are cards that have to be activated in response to a certain window. Of course, Phantasme in response to a Link summon. But yeah, Phantasme, of course, is great, allowing us to draw into more hand traps, fix better hands to go into our turn 3, or give us a better shot going into some of those going second board, or going first boards if we do need to go second. So Phantasme, of course, great all-around card for that. And again, with the heavy Link presence from the Mecha Phantom Beast, Auroradon, Needle Fiber, Link Cross, all that stuff, still a very viable engine to run. then 2 Ash Blossom and Joyous String, just very generic negation, very generic interruption, so love that card for that still. Wanted to add to the hand trap count as well. Then we have 3 Solemn Judgment. Stops blowout cards like evenly matched, main decked evenly matched, obviously. Main deck Twin Twisters, Cosmic Cyclones, things like that that we may lose really hard to. And it's just all around fantastic. Can stop Dark Ruler No More if need be. So obviously a lot of decks are maining these cards. Now you could potentially side this if the format does shift where those cards are being sided again, because I know a lot of people are starting to main Dark Ruler No More, evenly matched, main decking cards like Cosmic Cyclone, which this deck can get inherently indirectly hurt by those main deck choices, because our field spell is very, very important to this deck. So losing that is something we would like to prevent if we could. So Solemn Judgment in the main, I do really, really like it. You could opt to play something different. You can play Crackdown. You can play Impermanence. You could play other things if you wanted, other trap cards. It's really up to you. I just personally like the Solemn Judgment. And then last but not least, our engine requirement, the 1 Upstart Goblin, help to get our deck below that 40 card count to make it as consistent as possible. One other thing that I was mentioning about, or was thinking about playing in here, was an artifact engine. And if I did cut Solemn Judgment, it would probably be for an artifact engine. But I do like Judgment just a bit more because it's just useful against more matchups. As against some control decks, artifact engine might not be that great against things like Guru or whatever it may be, because they're obviously not going to the extra deck at all, so they don't care too much about Scythe. But Judgment is just great all around. Against any particular deck. So, we don't have to worry about drawing a Scythe with this particular list, I guess, as well. So yeah, that's it for the main deck breakdown. Now going into the extra deck, we'll go through this really quick. The Abyss Dweller, obviously accessible by our level 4s that we are playing. It's a water, so it doesn't conflict. And this brings up a good point, is talking about Parallel Exceed. I did want to experiment with it because it can help get to Dweller and other rank 4s pretty quick, but it's not a water monster. And then really the easiest time I would think that you'd ever be able to proc the effect of a Parallel Exceed would be right at the start of your turn with the Link summoning a Blue Slug, but that means you can't use Blue Slug's add back effect, which kind of makes your combo a little awkward and clunky, at least from my personal experience and how I like to play Marincess. So Parallel Exceed has just been kind of thrown out the window for me for this particular deck for the time being. I know you could play 4-Mud Skipper and search it via that engine, but just the sheer fact that it's not a water is what's driving me away from it. So, 1 Abyss Dweller. Then going into our Marincess Link monsters, we have 2 copies of Blue Slug. Very, very important card. One of our starting pieces for this deck. Very good extender, nonetheless. When it's Link Summoned, we can add back 1 of our Marincess monsters in our graveyard except itself, and obviously add it back to our hand. And once we do that, we cannot special summon monsters for this turn except for water monsters. So, again, we are locked into that restriction like a lot of other Marincess monsters do. So great resource recursion, all around fantastic card. Marincess Sea Angel, basically an engine requirement, I guess, not really. Helps us search our field spell, that's really all it does, and gives us that side arrow to help make cards like the Mandarin alive and much more accessible. First link to Marincess Crystal Heart. This card I would also consider an engine requirement, more so than Sea Angel, I guess. This card really only exists to help make whatever card we link summon with it unaffected by card effects when paired with the field spell. So these cards, pretty much in any good end field, will have gone through these 2 specific cards. They're only really needed at 1, because, going for them the 1 time will often be enough, and any other time you need them again, they can obviously be recycled through cards like Blue Slug, through cards like an enemy, or through cards like Marbled Rock, since this deck offers so much resource recursion. Now, we have 2 copies of Marincess Cruel and Enemy, basically our Monster Reborn for water monsters with 15 or lesser attack. This card, I mean, it's a great extender mid-combo, and it also can recur resources from the grave once it hits the graveyard from the field anywhere. So this card could be equipped off of our field spell effect and sent to the graveyard that way, and it'll trigger its effect. So a very versatile card to help get cards back we need and help extend as well. Might be a common theme you're noticing. A lot of cards can help extend, but also recur resources in the process. So very, very good engine all around. 1 Marbled Rock, but not 1 Marbled Rock, but 2 Marbled Rock, actually. This card I really do like a lot, especially turn 1. It's a very good turn 1 monster to go into over Wonderheart, but with Bubble Reef in the mix now, great Bubble Reef. This card kind of doesn't, won't be the end mainstay, I guess. of turn 1 boards as I used to make it, because it would have more attack than the Wonder Heart before. So making this card over Wonder Heart turn 1 made a lot more sense, and it also gave you the opportunity to add back an additional card. So as you're sort of climbing to your Bubble Reef turn 1, you know, you can go through Marble Rock in the process, but Marble Rock is still a very, very defensive card, so I still really like it for that aspect. And it doesn't offer, you know, a lot of the other cards that we have, like Bubble Reef, doesn't offer the defense that Marble Rock does. But yeah, so continuing on here for the rest of our Marincess Link monsters, we have 1 Bubble Reef, new from Eternity Code. I'm only opting to play 1 right now because I feel like 1 is really only necessary. But 2+ water monsters. Once per turn during the standby phase, you can banish 1 face-up water monster you control or in your graveyard to draw 1 card. Each time a monster or monsters is banished, this card gains 600 attack for each monster banished until the end of this turn. You can send 1 water monster from your hand to the graveyard as cost, especially when one of your banished Marincess monsters. So this card is nice. It doesn't really offer any defensive properties, which is my problem with it. You really need to like have a copy of like Wave if you're trying to go into this turn 1, because going into your next turn, it will offer you a little bit of a resource boost by giving you that additional draw, but it has to be in your standby phase. So if you have a way to protect the Bubble Reef, I would say go into it turn 1, but if not, go into the Marble Rock, because it does offer, of course, that battle phase protection, you know, via its discard effect. When the opponent's monster declares an attack, you can send 1 Marincess monster of mana to the graveyard. For that battle, monsters cannot be destroyed by battle. Also, take no battle damage. So, can be protected in the battle phase, which is nice, which this card cannot. But this card does have more attack, and when fully equipped, will be the most attack out of any of your Marincess Link monsters, Wonder Heart included. But I really like Wonder Heart, just the one, and I obviously cut one of the Wonder Hearts for the Great Bubble Reef, but this card is great if you are going in for a lot of damage, because it can just, you know, take one of your equipped monsters, whether it be Bubble Reef or Marble Rock, bring it up to the main monster zone and start swinging with more damage. And it can also negate attacks like that as well, so a bit more defensive than the Bubble Reef. But again, Bubble Reef, I feel like it's one of those cards you should only really go into if you have the added protection for it. Otherwise, it could be sort of a sitting duck. Then into some other generic Link monsters. 1 IP Masquerade and Nightmare Unicorn. This engine, I was opting to play, what was it, Phoenix. But again, with Dynamiscus in the main deck, I feel like didn't really require it. But in some cases, these are more like turn 2, turn 3 cards. Because obviously turn 1, pretty much 99% of the time, you're going to end up locking yourself into waters in some way, shape, or form. But that doesn't mean you're not going to be, you know, you're going to be locked into waters for the entire game. That's not entirely true. That's why I'm still opting to play cards like Avermax and Borreload, because these cards deal with problem cards that the Marincess engine can't deal with it on its own. So these cards are absolutely necessary for that. Having the generic removal of Nightmare Unicorn and possibly being able to set up some, you know, indestructible Borreloads or Avermaxes, or even any of our Marincess cards with Masquerena, you know, I definitely want to have that opportunity to do so. So you're not always going to be locked into water, so I think it's fine to play some non-water monsters in the extra deck, especially if they offer really unparalleled utility that the main deck, the main core of Marincess monsters that don't allow you to achieve, you know, these cards can sort of fix those problems. All right, so now going to the side deck here, few things I want to know, specifically some conflictions that can happen with Phantasme and Chthana. If you do know you're going second, it would probably be best to side out 1, if not maybe all copies of Chthana. So when you do drop Phantasme, you know, these cards don't conflict essentially because you will control an effect monster. So one sort of thing to point out. So you could potentially, if you knew you're going second, drop something like Tenny Spirit Chthana and replace it with something like Dark Ruler No More, just to help break boards in of its own right. So that you could side, again, 1 to maybe 3 copies of the Tenny Spirit out. If you knew you were going to go second. But I like Phantasme in the main deck for going first because, again, it can help you sort of establish onto your already really good field that you're able to create turn 1 and help you draw into more hand traps and disruptions like Wave. And just seeing Wave and getting Wave into circulation, very important. So obviously that could go out. And again, even if the matchup calls for it, cards like Phantasme could go out of the main deck as well, in place for some more back row removal. Solemn Judgment could also get sided out as well if you knew you were going to go second, for maybe in place of cards like Evenly Matched. But as far as I'm concerned, there's really not much else. Maybe 1 copy of Mandarin and Pascalus for whatever cards you may want. But other than that, that's really all I'm seeing is cards that I would particularly side out would probably be these. 12 cards right here as being some of your best candidates to side out in any particular game. And obviously there'll be a mock side deck on the screen that you guys can sort of take inspiration from. Much like this entire build, take it as inspiration. I'm still going to be offering as a template for you guys to shape and mold into whatever best way fits your personal playstyle and how you like to play Marincess. But yeah, this is my take on this list. No Scripton, no Swap Frog, no Parallel Exceed. I've given my reasons for those. One other thing I want to talk about specifically is actually the addition of cards like Update Jammer, Transcode Talker, and Access Code Talker into the extra deck. If I had Access Code, I probably would do it. Because I know there's some ways that you can like pull off an OTK, but I'm pretty sure that needs Parallel Exceed, which I guess I'm not playing, so maybe not necessary. But Access Code Talker is a card you could definitely play in here. There's no reason you couldn't. I'm not going to tell you you can't, of course. Feel free, again, to shape this deck and to mold it into whatever you would want to see it as your personal playstyle. This is my personal list here for the month of May/June 2020. And yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. As always, Winter Kill signing out. We'll see you guys in the next one. And again, a massive shout out to Prestige for the amazing hookup. And of course, a huge shout out to my Tier 3 Divine channel members here on YouTube, Academic Thick, Travis Harrison, Zors. Thank you guys again.